Welcome to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Lisa Collins, a member of the City Club's Forum Board and producer of today's program. For more than a century, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people have come together to find solutions to our region's biggest challenges. We've gathered today at the Sentinel Hotel and are joined by thousands of people via X-Ray FM and its radio stations at 107.1, 91.7 FM. KGB's website, KGW's website, Facebook feed and news app, and Open Signal's community media television stations. We are incredibly grateful for all the work they do to bring Friday Forum to our community. In addition to City Club's valued media partners, our sponsors, volunteers, and staff enable us to put on Oregon's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank AARP Oregon for sponsoring and partnershiping with us on this week's debate. Also, Avangrid Renewables and SEIU 49 for their generous support of this and all of our Friday forums this fall. I'd like to also say a special thanks to Echo Northwest and Uber for sponsoring today's program. Please join me in showing our appreciation to everyone who has made this event possible. I know you are eager to hear from the candidates who are running in this historic race, so let's get right to it. Joanne Hardesty is a former Oregon representative and former president of the NAACP Portland. An independent consultant, Ms. Hardesty has served in many roles as a nonprofit leader and community activist. She is also a military veteran, having served in the United States Navy from 1978 to 1983. Loretta Smith is a two-term Multnomah County Commissioner representing North and Northeast Portland. Before serving Multnomah County, she worked for 21 years for Senator John Wyden, where she continued to advance in her service to the public. The moderator for today's debate is Dr. Melody Rose. Dr. Rose is the 15th president of Merrillhurst University and a nationally recognized scholar of women in politics. She has served as chancellor of the Oregon University system and in many roles at Portland State University. Please join me in welcoming our guest.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that generous introduction, and I would like to welcome our candidates and, of course, all of the voters who are either here in the room or listening with us today. Thank you all for making time for this important conversation. Let me give you a little bit of the lay of the land and the rules of the road. To open our debate today, each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. Once the opening statements have been delivered, we'll move on to prepared questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer her question. No rebuttals will be allowed today so that we can move through a broad set of questions. Questions were developed collaboratively by City Club's community, and no questions were shared in advance with our candidates. When we've completed the prepared questions, the candidates will then have the opportunity to present a 90-second closing statement. Once the prepared questions and statements have all been completed, I will ask audience questions via note cards. Those are all on your tables. We won't be taking questions at the microphone today, as you've already heard. So if at any time during the debate you have a question, please do be sure to write it down and hold it up high in the air so City Club staff can see you and collect your question. Each side will have 45 seconds to answer questions from the audience. All of you in the room today are so deeply appreciated, and we're very glad that you're here. But we ask you to please refrain from clapping or cheering during this debate. It's very important that our broadcast audience also have the opportunity to hear from both sides without interruption. However, if you do hear something of interest, something that catches your attention, either positively or negatively, feel free to snap your fingers to let us know that this is an important topic. The candidates and all of you should know that if either candidate goes past her allotted time, and you can see my esteemed timekeepers here at the front of the room, her microphone will be turned off and the discussion will move forward. So are we ready? We flipped a coin earlier this morning to determine who would give the opening remarks first, and I would invite Ms. Smith to begin this process. You won the coin toss. Please begin.
Thank you, Melody. I want to thank City Club for giving us this opportunity to tell you all a little bit about ourselves. So when I think about being on the City Council and think about the issues that are important, I think about the lens that I use. I use a lens of 5 generations of the Smith family here. My grandfather and grandmother came here from Brooklyn, New York. They were recruited to come here to work in the Kaiser shipyards during World War II. And when the war was over, the folks who recruited all the black folks that came here, they wanted them to go back to where they came from. But thankfully for my grandfather and my family, we stayed. Back at that time, you know, housing was affordable, jobs were plentiful, and they were able to raise a family of 8. And my dad was the only boy. My dad was a boxer, and he traveled to the Midwest. He met my mom, brought her back to Oregon, and they raised a family. What I do know is that when I graduated from Oregon State University, that it was still affordable. I raised a son here, and we were able to own a home. But Portland is different. Portland is changing, and I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have an opportunity here in Portland.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty, your opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Take a moment to look around this room. This is Portland. It is diverse. There are people from many different backgrounds. And I am running for Portland City Council because today, the further away from City Hall you live, the less you believe your voice matters. I am running for City Council because I am a convener. I look for commonality. I look for how we solve our systemic problems together. My campaign from the beginning has been about creating one Portland, one not divided by race, one not divided by country or origin, one not divided by economic status. I have gone to every corner of the city of Portland, and let me tell you, we have much more in common than we have different. What we need is the political will to do the hard work of building regional coalitions, listening to people who have not been listened to, and developing a vision about where we're headed. I love Portland and I love Portlanders, and I know together we can solve these systemic problems. I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you, both candidates. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to our prepared questions for the candidates. We'll begin with a set of questions around how you intend to govern should you win your office. So question 1, and this goes first to Ms. Smith. As a small governing body, each new member changes the chemistry of the City Council. If you are elected, how will the council be different?
I think the council will be different because I have a different lived experience. I raised my son in this community as a single parent. He went to public schools and then later on to the University of Washington. I will be looking at this as someone who had a kid and we moved 4 times before he was in 1st grade, who understands that housing affordability is so important for so many people. And as we're doing this, that we need to make sure we bring everybody to the table. I will be a city councilwoman as I am as a county commissioner, bringing the stakeholders to the table. You won't find me actually putting out policies before talking to the people that it will impact. That's the kind of city commissioner I will be, and to make sure that there is an equity lens on everything that we do.
Ms. Hardesty, your response.
The City Council will be different because for the first time in its history, the majority of City Council members will be women. That will be significant. In addition to that, my presence on the City Council means that the City Council is out in the community and not expecting community members to pay for parking, drive downtown, wait 2 hours for their 2 to 3 minutes of public input. The reality is that we need a bold City Council. We have 2 years, I believe, before we become another city of the haves and have-nots. I am proud to have earned the endorsement of Commissioner Amanda Fritz and Commissioner Chloe Udaly, and I am sure that the men on the City Council will be very happy to work with a strong group of women that have big vision and was ready for the opportunity.
Thank you both. Moving on to question 2. Each of you in recent months during press coverage of the campaign has come under some criticism of your leadership style and/or record. What would you say is the public's biggest misperception about you? And for this question, I would invite Ms. Hardesty to begin.
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest misperception is I'm this like raving lunatic that's yelling and jumping up and down and screaming at people on a regular basis. The reality is I am someone who does my homework. I read the audits. I read the reports. I understand the interconnectedness of the issues that confront Portland. I may be best known for police accountability, but I've been a strong environmental justice advocate. I've been a strong advocate of public media. I have been a strong advocate of making sure that those who don't have a voice at City Hall, their voice is heard. My history shows that I have the ability to work with anyone who has a vision about how we move forward together. And I have had a long record of working with people who don't always agree with me.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
I think what people miss is that I have been effective for 8 years as a county commissioner. I have passed over 80 resolutions and amendments that require 3 votes. And in doing so, that is a lot of work that you have to do, a lot of collaborating. And I also listen to the community. I am very passionate about, working for the most vulnerable in this community. And I think I listened to the community. When the community came to me and said, you know what, Commissioner, our kids of color are not graduating at the same rate as everyone else. I did something about it. I put money into a promised neighborhood to make sure that they had wraparound supports for communities of color and worked with Latino Network, NEA, SEI, and ERCO. And I have patience, and we patiently waited while we tried 3 times to get the federal promised neighborhood money. And guess what? Last month, we got $28 million for wraparound services for this community. And I think that's what people miss about my connectedness to Washington, D.C.
Thank you both very much. Let's move on to governance more broadly writ. Every decade, there is a charter review commission convened to contemplate our city's form of government. The next review would come during your first term should you win the seat. The City Club also recently finished a soon-to-be-released research report on the form of city government. In your view, what should the Charter Review Commission consider, and how would any proposed changes alter the council's performance? Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I think one of the first things that we need to do is we need to change this form of government where each commissioner has a bureau. I won't mind being responsible for a bureau, but I think what it does, it takes away from the leadership abilities of the mayor, and it really puts government, city government at a standstill. So if there's anything that I will be supporting is to change the way the city government is structured right now. The other piece is that I think that we need to have some sort of pot of money to help with education and making sure that our young people can graduate from high school and make sure that they have jobs, not just summer jobs, but year-round jobs. We've done that at the county. I want to expand that program under my watch and making sure that young people who are low income and underserved, that they have this opportunity to succeed in the city of Portland too.
Thank you, Ms. Hardesty.
I am already working and telling community members to talk to their state representative and their state senator and put their name in for the Charter Review Commission that will be appointed in 2021. It is my belief that it is not my job to dictate how people are governed, but it is my job to make sure that the Charter Review Commission is fully funded for 2 years as the charter requires, and that they have as much support, staff support necessary so that they're reaching out to every corner of the city. It is the people of the city of Portland that should decide how they want to be governed. I don't work in silos, I don't live in silos, and I'm happy to be joining a commission with Commissioner Udaley, who will work wherever the work takes her. I love the bureaus I will get, but I won't be stopped by those bureaus, and real leadership shouldn't be.
Thank you both. Let's now go back to the form of government that we currently have. Question number 4. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, I understand, has shared that he plans to give the new commissioner who wins this campaign the Fire and Rescue Bureau and the Bureau of Emergency Management. Can you tell us how you would make the city safer through your oversight of these bureaus? Ms. Hardesty.
I am giddy at having the opportunity to manage the rest of our public safety system. We spend a lot of time and resources, 54% of the budget, in fact, on policing. But what we don't do is invest in our 911 call center. We're just starting to bring staffing up to a decent level. But in my conversations with Director Bob Cossey and his staff, it became very clear that what we really need to do is embed mental health professionals in the 911 call center so that when somebody calls with a mental health issue, a mental health professional triages the call and sends the right first responder. We fail miserably today because sometimes we send the police, the fire department, and an ambulance. What a waste of public resources. We can do so much better, and I'm looking forward to the work.
Ms. Smith, your response.
Thank you. There are 2 things that we do at the City of Portland, and one of them is infrastructure and public safety. And Mayor Wheeler has already said that we would take over the current bureaus that Commissioner Salzman has, which is the Fire Bureau. One thing that I do know, it's not a matter of if, it's when will we have the next big earthquake. I think I'm going to spend a lot of my time making sure that the residents of the city of Portland understand what's at stake. We're on a 150-year-old earthquake line, and we should be prepared. I think that we can do a better job of what we're doing, and each and every person in this room and in the city of Portland should know what to do and how to do. I represent Multnomah County on the RDPO for the Regional Disaster Preparedness. I'm very familiar with the emergency crisis system, and I know that 94% of the emergencies that will happen in an earthquake, the neighbors next to you will save you. So we need to make sure that everybody has the appropriate information and kits.
Thank you very much. We just talked about the safety of our residents. One group that is sometimes overlooked in safety and security conversations is our elder population. With that in mind, Recognizing that our region is expected to see a 106% growth in individuals aged 65 and older, compared to the projected 35% growth for the general population. The population over the age of 85 is the fastest growing segment of our demographics. What is your vision for making Portland an even more age-friendly city where people of all ages and abilities can thrive? Ms. Smith, please begin.
Thank you. Being a commissioner on a safety net government like Multnomah County, you get a chance to see a lot of the social issues that happen to the most vulnerable people in our community, and seniors are it. And I can remember when I asked a manager when they would clear the waiting list for Project Independence. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is to help seniors stay in their home. And I wanted to figure out how could we get these 300 people off the list, and the manager said to me, through attrition. I just thought that that was unconscionable, that they would tell me that they would wait for seniors to die before we actually serve them. So I dropped an amendment for $450,000 and said, please clear that Project Independence waiting list. We need to make sure that we're reaching out to seniors at every level for every kind of emergency in everything that we do, and that's what I'll do, spend my time working with the most vulnerable residents in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty.
I live in East Portland, where the people on the freeway overpass begging for money are women over 60. It's not rocket science that when your rent goes up, 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 and your income doesn't, that you are forced to look for other ways to get food and medicine. That is not acceptable. And when we talk about housing that people can afford to live in, we rarely talk about seniors. We have to be much more innovative. We need to talk about shared housing and multi-generational housing, and making sure that empty nesters could partner and have tenants that are families that need housing. We cannot use the police to solve our lack of affordable housing. We must, as a community, step up and make sure that we are taking care of the most vulnerable people in our community and not actually giving money to private interests to solve the housing crisis.
Thank you. For our radio audience, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Dr. Melody Rose, president of Marylhurst University. Today we're hearing from Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith, the two candidates running for position 3 on the Portland City Council. Now, let's talk a little bit about revenue and spending. Because of measures 5 and 50, which were passed many years ago, we have an inequitable property tax system that results in some residents paying disproportionately high taxes. What are you going to do about that? Ms. Hardesty.
Oh, thank you so much for that one.
Softball.
It is absolutely true. I live in East Portland, where we get less services and we pay more for them. This inequity has existed at least for the last 3 decades. There have been at least 3 audits written to highlight this inequity. And so clearly, we know that it's a problem, but we've been unwilling to actually do the hard work of fixing it. I can honestly say that that won't be my priority in my first year in office, because I have to work on getting people off the street. I have to work on making sure that people can live with dignity in our community. I will be monitoring the budgets, of course. We have a $4 billion budget, and we have a lot of moving parts. What I've learned from talking to employees is one of our biggest challenges is being able to hire the professional staff we need at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I think that that issue will become a huge issue in the next few years, and that's something that the state legislature is going to have to work out. But I know when we try to make some changes to some of the rules at Multnomah County about taxing ADUs, we really put seniors in a disproportionate position where they were being taxed at a higher rate than everyone else. And I stood with Mayor Hales to go against Multnomah County taxing ADU properties as an entire property instead of just taxing the ADU. I know that seniors are property rich and cash poor, and they're building these ADUs to go in the back of their houses so that they can rent out the front. And those are ways in which that they can have a way to increase their income monthly. I will be very supportive of doing that and making sure that those SDCs, that they stay constant and that they're able to stay in their homes without being overly taxed.
Thank you both. The three biggest parts of the city's general fund budget are police, fire, and parks. In a tight budget situation, would you cut spending on one of those services to pay for something else? Ms. Smith?
Let's start with this. Danielle Outlaw, who is the chief of police, she asked for additional public safety officers. Today, we have more people who live in the city of Portland than we did 10 years ago. The last 3 years, we've had 45,000 people a year move here 3 years in a row. And so I did support Danielle Outlaw in her support of increasing the public safety officers, because we do need to make sure that everybody in every part of the city is protected. The other issue is I did also support her in her efforts to increase and to have implicit bias training of every officer in the month of May. Because what we know is that when there are problems with the community and police, there is a disconnect. And I want to make sure that our public safety officers, they know how to deal with communities of color and people who are experiencing mental health challenges. And so for me, I think we cannot skimp on making sure that public safety is #1 in the city of Portland, and that goes all the way out to St. John's and Portland, East Portland as well.
I need to follow up on that. So the question is, would you cut spending in one of those areas to pay for something else?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty.
Today, we spend 54% of the general fund on policing, yet none of us feel safer. None of us feel like we are getting the return on our investment. It is important that we realize that we will not police our way out of some of the critical problems that we have, and therefore we have to think about what are good community solutions. So for example, last year, 54% of arrests by Portland police officers were of people, if but for not being houseless, would never have entered our criminal justice system. The fact that we are criminalizing people for the crime of being poor, we should be ashamed. That is not how you build public safety. You build public safety by building a community that looks out for each other, that knows that I am my brother's keeper, and a gun is not the solution to some of the systemic problems that we're faced in our community.
So again, I'll press on the question. Police, fire, and parks, would you cut one of them to pay for something else?
I would invest more in parks because I have this fabulous new park in my neighborhood, Gateway Discovery Park. That would be a great place to invest money, because if we have more parks and more green spaces, we will have less need for armed officers to be harassing people who are just hanging out in the community.
Thank you. The city has a huge transportation maintenance backlog, as we all know, on our way into City Club on Fridays. Far bigger than the local tax, the gas tax, or increased state revenue can address. The city also has a significant housing and homelessness crisis, as you both have referenced already this afternoon. As a city councilor, which would be your higher priority, housing or fixing our roads? Ms. Hardesty, you may begin.
They are interconnected. We have to, housing cannot exist without a solid transportation system. We need a public transportation system that is world-class, that is free, and that is built for the people who need it most. We also must make sure that we are building housing at every income level. Having closed-door meetings with Mr. Schnitzer and with the other guy who has no experience in working with houseless people or building homes for people who are low income, I find it just makes me crazy. Why is it that the people with the lived experience of being houseless aren't invited to the mayor's office for those meetings? Why is it only private interests downtown are having meetings about how we fix our houseless problem? Unacceptable, and as a city commissioner, I would not allow those meetings to happen without people who had the lived experience.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. The city has a huge transportation maintenance backlog, far bigger than the local gas tax or increased state revenues can address. The city also has a significant housing and homelessness crisis. As a city councilor, which will be your higher priority, housing or fixing our streets?
Well, I think housing and homelessness, without a doubt, are the huge issues of the day. No matter who I talk to, social service providers, advocates, people on the street, business people, homelessness and the camping associated with it is a big, big deal. And so we cannot afford to build our way out of this homeless crisis. What we need to do is make sure that, one, identify the people on the street, those 54% of those people that are on our streets, what is actually their issue? How can we help them from not being homeless? What we did at Multnomah County was, I know that 50% of the people that we picked up and put in our county jails, they had mental health and drug and alcohol issues. The issue is we need to put more resources in those treatment programs for drug and alcohol rehabilitation and for mental health services. We're spending $60 million a year over existing services, and we're not getting a return on our investment. We need to invest more in our people.
Thank you very much. As you know, the city and county are tackling homelessness together. How would you grade their performance, and what would you do differently to reduce homelessness in Portland if you are elected city commissioner? Ms. Smith.
Thank you for that question. As a county commissioner, I have that task right now. We're actually putting in $30 million from the city and the county, which equals $60 million into additional homeless shelters. I would cut that money in half and start buying up multiplexes, making sure we buy down the affordability. Yes, and two, I'm so appreciative of Jordan Snitzer because he owns Wapato. I'd open up Wapato in a hot minute because you know what? It can serve 500 to 1,000 people, get them off the street tomorrow. We cannot afford to have one more person die on our streets. And on my watch, that's not going to happen. We had 58 people die on our streets, and that is unacceptable in a community that is so rich in resources and buildings. This is a huge issue, and it's very personal for me. As a woman and a single parent, I couch surfed at my grandparents' house because I didn't have any place for me and my son to go. I know how important it is. I know how important housing it is because I have lived it as a single person. We have to be deliberate in what we do.
Thank you. Do you care to give the county and city partnership a grade?
I think we have not gotten a great return on our investment, and I think we're at a C-. Anytime you have 1,700 people that are unsheltered still on your city streets, we have not done a great job.
A grade?
C-.
Thank
C-.
you. Ms. Hardesty, your response.
Would you tell me the question again?
Absolutely. As you know, the city and county are tackling homelessness together. How would you grade their performance, and what would you do differently to reduce homelessness in Portland if you are elected city commissioner?
I think one of the biggest barriers to us solving our housing crisis is how many barriers the city of Portland puts in place to prevent people from actually building housing. So for example, since the housing crisis, it now takes almost 3 times as long to get a permit if you're dividing land to put a fourplex on it. It is ridiculous. I've been told that it used to take a year and you could do both processes simultaneously. Now you must do them separately. My job will be to remove the barriers for community members to do the right thing and to reward people who are actually doing the right thing rather than incentivizing people to give us a penance.
Thank you, and a grade. I am a professor after all.
I think the grade right now is still undetermined. I think that people want to do the right thing, but I think that there's some silo thinking and there's some thinking about, but we've always done it this way, so why wouldn't we do it this way? I think what we need is to make sure that the Metro Housing Bond passes and that the state constitutional change happens so that we can have much more flexibility about where and how we build housing. We must make sure housing is available at every income level in every neighborhood. Your income should not determine your zip code, and that's the trend that we're on today.
Thank you. I'll call that grade to be determined. As we've already discussed today, of course, Portland is rapidly diversifying. Today, 1 in 3 adults in Portland is a person of color, and half of all of our children are children of color. Yet the racial inequities remain and are in some very significant ways widening. Part of the city's response to racism was the creation and support of the Office of Equity and Human Rights. What grade, again, Professor, what grade would you give this office for its performance, and what would have to happen for that office to get an A+? Ms. Hardesty.
I was part of the community that worked to develop the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and our vision was that the city would live up to its billing, that it would be inclusive, that it would engage communities of color, and it would seek outcomes that we continue to say we want. Unfortunately, we hired someone with no deep roots in the community to be the director, and let me just say, it wasn't someone who worked well with others. What I'd like to see as we move forward is that the director be someone who's grounded in Portland, who understands the broken promises. How many times Portland Development Commission / Prosper Portland has failed to deliver on its promises? What we want are people who know and will challenge the status quo and won't just accept the information that's given to them. We will seek outcomes.
Did we get grades?
Well, there are good people in the office now. I think I have asked the mayor to actually do an audit so that the public will know what has been accomplished in 5 years. I know there are good people. Right now, there's an interim director who's phenomenal. And I believe the people that are there today could bring it to an A+.
Okay.
But they have not had the support, and they have not had a visionary leader to allow them to get there.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, your response.
Thank you. At this point, I couldn't give a grade of the office, but I can give a grade of the city. Right now, we have so many disparities in our communities of color around healthcare, education, jobs, and a whole myriad of things. One of the reasons why I really supported my summer jobs program that I work really heavily with Mayor Wheeler with is because I know a job, a good paying job, house buying wage job will help you to deal with issues around gentrification, housing affordability, and the ability to take care of a family. And so really working in the weeds with 25 kids in 2011 and growing that program to 650 kids that we pay for today, that's going to be a huge deal because we're going to have a labor shortage in the next 5 to 7 years. And we have to have kids who come from, and adults who come from underserved communities and low-income communities to be able to get that grade up, because that's what the ball game is. It's about having living wage, house buying jobs.
So a grade for the city's performance on this topic?
I can't judge it at this point because I have to look at a lot of things. Do I like the office? I remember when Amanda Fritz was leading the effort to open up this office, and I was very much in support of it. So I think it's great to have, but we have to have some equity lenses on how we spend our resources in each and every bureau, not just the Bureau of Diversity and Equity.
Thank you both very much. I'm told by my trusty timers that this will be my last prepared question, and then we'll move on to other aspects of our conversation today. In a recent community survey conducted by the City Club of Portland, civic engagement emerged as the most prominent theme. Given this, please share one example of how local government policies or practices stifle civic engagement, and an example of a new policy or practice the city could implement that would promote our city's engagement. Ms. Smith?
Yes, I think outreach. I'm looking at this room, and I see more black men in this room than I've seen in other rooms in a long time. And that's because me and Joanne are here, I assume, right? And one of the things that I noticed when I was at Multnomah County, the first briefings that I got from Scott Taylor, who was at DCJ, Department of Community Justice, he said, we're doing great in terms of recidivism, except African-American men. And I said, well, have you asked African-American men what they want? And he said, no. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna have a town hall meeting for African-American men. And we had one, and they served, the folks who came, they were from ages 12 to 74. We gave them a survey, and that's how we knew. You have to engage communities of color, and particularly vulnerable residents in our community like African American men. I have a vision for African American men, black and brown men in this community. I want them to benefit from the resources that are here. And so you will see a lot of reaching out into different communities when you get Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. And Ms. Hardesty?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Happy to read it again. Please share one example of how local government policies or practices can stifle civic engagement, and one example of a new policy or practice the city could implement to promote civic engagement.
What a great question. And so I'll give you two in my 1 minute. Let's see if I can do it. Portland Clean Energy Fund initiative will be a game changer. When communities of color control their own destiny and get tired of waiting for government to actually provide jobs for women and minorities and emerging businesses, and over and over and over again end up on the losing end, communities of color came together, developed an initiative. It's on the ballot. They collected 66,000 signatures. It's going to be phenomenal. It's a game changer. And so that's one. Two, Southwest and East Portland have a lot in common. They were annexed at the same time into the city of Portland. Neither have good sidewalks, good lighting, good infrastructure. Both get towed over and over and over again. It's just too expensive to give you sidewalks and infrastructure. I want them to join forces and put pressure on the city of Portland to do what the promise was, do the infrastructure improvements. Today is the day it's going to be cheapest.
Thank you both so much. So now let's move to our closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make her closing remarks. Ms. Smith, you may go first.
Thank you. Again, when I look at the city of Portland and this huge responsibility of being a Portland City Council person, I'm looking at it again through a lens of 5 generations. I know how important it is to make sure that everybody is brought to the table. As a city commissioner, we will tackle the most important issues around affordable housing, homelessness, and making sure that everyone can be entrepreneurs and they can run businesses and get a job, a good paying job here in the city of Portland. The other issue is we all have to figure out that we're not living in Mayberry anymore. We are a big time city that has big time city issues. And we need to figure out how do we actually help those who are the most vulnerable. And I think those are folks who are living on our streets. You're going to find that I will spend a lot of time trying to figure out strategies to make sure we move people off the front of sidewalks. It was not an accident when someone was stabbed 17 times in front of his home because he asked someone who was homeless to move. He was stabbed 17 times. That changed the game for me. That changed how I look at what's important in this community. We have to make sure that folks who are on our streets, they have a place to go.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty.
Thank you. We are about to experience a historic election, but let me be clear. This election is not about electing the first black woman to the Portland City Council, although that's what it will do. You have a real choice in this election, and I hope you do your homework. I hope you go to Orstar and find out who's putting money behind the campaigns of both of us. I hope you will see that my campaign has from the beginning been people-driven, with 1,500 individual donors, from $5 to $5,000, with $5,000 being from my ex-mother-in-law. My campaign has been about putting hundreds of people on the street every weekend, having eyeball-to-eyeball conversations. What do you want for Portland? What is your dream? My campaign is not because I want to be the first black woman on Portland City Council. It has nothing to do with that. But it's all about the service I've provided to this city, for free many times, because I love Portland. I made a choice to move to Portland, and I can tell you, every corner of this city are wonderful people who are just waiting to be asked to help. So help. Vote for me as your next city council member. Joanne Hardesty, position 3.
Thank you both very much for your closing remarks. For our radio audience today, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Dr. Melody Rose, president of Merrillhurst University. Today we're hearing from Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith, the two candidates seeking position 3 on the Portland City Council. And now let's go to the audience for the next questions. Everyone watching or listening today is welcome to ask a question. I can tell already I will not get through all of them. We will not be taking questions at the microphone today. Instead, if you've written a question on an index card, please be sure to hold it up high so City Club staff can see you and retrieve it and bring it up front. You may also submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag #FridayForum. Candidates will have 45 seconds to answer the questions from the floor. And I'm delighted to tell you that the first question from the floor today is coming from a student at the Odyssey program. It's wonderful to have kids in the room today. This should make us feel much better about our future. Welcome. So the question from our Odyssey student: what is the first thing that you'll do if you're elected? And I believe the first question goes to Ms. Hardesty.
The first thing I will do is pull Portland out of the Joint Tourism Task Force. And I will do that because we cannot pretend to be a sanctuary city while we have people being targeted by our federal government. Mayor Tom Potter made a very intelligent decision to not join in the first place, because it was clear that if you can't supervise your employees, why would you put them there? So that is my number one order of business. My second order of business is to get the mayor to come to one of my community listening sessions so that he can hear directly from the community the things that I've heard.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. One of the first things that I'm going to do is to convene a meeting of public safety officers, housing advocates, and people in the community to try to figure out how we deal with this whole issue of camping and homelessness. How do we deal with the issue around folks who are service resistors? There are a number of people who are veterans and who need services on our streets. How do we actually get them to use our services and to increase the amount of services that we have available for residential treatment and for mental health services? Because it is so important. If we don't deal with this issue around camping as it relates to homelessness, we're going to have businesses moving out of this community if we don't figure out how to deal with this.
Thank you very much. Our next question from the audience, first to Ms. Smith, is what is your position on rent control?
I think rent control is a huge deal, and we need to look at increased renter protections. As someone who raised a young black man in this community, and we moved 4 times before first grade, I know it was so important that I find a place to rent that was affordable and that was in a great school district. And so for me, making sure that single mothers and low-income families have an opportunity to have increased rent protections, that is going to be a big issue for me.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty.
I support rent control as one tool to stabilize people in their home. As a renter, I can tell you that it is frightening to know that rents go up, up, and your income does not. I have been very supportive of the efforts that Commissioner Udaley has actually produced around protecting renters. We know that it's cheaper to keep people in a home they have than it is to find them a new home. I've never met somebody living on the street that wanted to live on the street, and I can tell you that every self-organized camp has never had one call from law enforcement. We have to do better and not criminalize people.
Thank you. And the next question goes first to Ms. Hardesty. What is your position on requiring mandatory seismic upgrades for private building owners? Excuse me.
I think that the proposal that was recently passed by the City of Portland is a good vision. However, I think unless you are bringing community nonprofits, the faith institutions, and community centers, and actually helping them obtain the resources to do those upgrades, you are putting a huge unfair burden on organizations and individuals with few resources. I think that it was a mistake to pass something into law that becomes a mandate that you know people don't have the resources to actually do. The city has a responsibility to make sure we're safe in an earthquake.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
I think the URM ordinance, it was drafted from a place that was trying to keep residents in the city of Portland safe. But the issue is the cost of making sure that your building, the unreinforced masonry buildings, are up to code and earthquake sustainable. It's absolutely not attainable for many small businesses and property owners. We should be putting some money in our one-time only money into a pot at the city so that many of these small businesses can take out zero interest to low interest loans so they can get their property up to speed. The other issue is, I know in the African American community, the churches, they don't have the ability to come up with those dollars to keep everyone safe. We need to help them.
Thank you very much. This next question from the floor will start with Ms. Smith. How will you monitor and work with the EPA in cleaning up Portland's Harbor Superfund?
We need to do that. We need to have a great relationship with them and make sure that our environmental or sustainability offices and transportation departments are working with them. It's just like the issue with the I-5 bridge. There are so many toxins in the county of Multnomah, particularly in low-income and communities of color. The idling that's happening over the water and happening on I-5 that's going straight through these communities have been a huge reason why there's so many toxins in the air. And we need to identify opportunities where we can be most helpful and use our city offices to deal with this issue.
Thank you. Ms. Hardesty, your response?
When Governor Brown asked me to set on the Cleaner Air Task Force, it was about creating more protections for community members who are breathing toxic air. The reality is we now have more inspections and we have more staff from DEQ that will be able to monitor air quality. But the reality is that we're not monitoring enough of the air quality, especially in areas with high pollution like North Portland and East Portland, where 205 and 84 cross. As a city commissioner, it will be my job to keep this issue in the forefront of our thinking and monitoring. And as far as the harbor cleanup, we need the polluters to pay for the cleanup, not taxpayers.
Thank you both very much. Moving to the next question from the audience, what would you say are the key differences between you and your opponent? Ms. Hardesty, would you like to begin?
Oh, Don, why'd you start with me? What are the key differences? I'm a military vet. I'm a former legislator. I've run a community nonprofit. I've trained hundreds of community members in knowing their rights when they're interacting with law enforcement of all kind. Let's see, what else do I got? Oh, I'm a small business owner. I bought the NAACP Portland branch back from almost extinction. I have the support of 2 commissioners, city commissioners in this race. I'm proud to have the support of the employees of the city of Portland, both ASME and SEIU 49 and 503. I have all the employees who work at the city want me to be their next city commissioner.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, your response.
I think that I've been effective in making sure that we pass policies that impact communities of color, low-income folks, and people who are experiencing homelessness. I have had the opportunity to be effective and not extreme, because what you need to know is that it's about being collaborative. And I think collaborating with state and federal government to bring in additional resources, to leverage the current local resources is a huge deal. And that's the difference between me and my opponent. And the fact that I do want to open up Wapato and make sure we get homeless people off the streets. I think it is our responsibility, it is irresponsible of us to waste a property that the public paid for and not use it for good.
Thank you. I'm out of time for questions. I'd just like to say one more thing. Do you have a bet on the World Series?
Is there a World Series happening?
Ms. Smith?
I want baseball to come to Portland.
Okay.
Yay.
And on that note, our time is up for the day. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists and Lisa Collins for producing today's program.